Because what if everything they had told her was a lie? If this story is already touching your heart, leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and let us know in the comments where you're listening from. And if you feel this is worthwhile, click the Super Thanks button. Your support means everything and helps us keep bringing stories like this to you. The church was too quiet for a wedding. Only the rustle of Elena's silk dress against the cold marble of the aisle echoed between the high walls, mingled with the muffled sound of her own breathing. The air smelled of white lilies and candle wax, a scent that should have brought peace, but only intensified the tightness in her chest. Elena Martinez never imagined her wedding would be like this, empty of love, filled with obligation, and sealed by a contract signed 3 days earlier. At 24, she was about to become the wife of a man she barely knew, Vincent Harrington. The name sounded heavy, powerful, almost untouchable. She had met him only twice, formal meetings, surrounded by lawyers and papers, where the words exchanged were as cold as the agreement itself that bound them. But there was something that calmed her, something that made it all bearable. The rumor. Vincent Harrington is impotent. The phrase had been whispered by her aunt during a tense dinner, days before the wedding. Elena felt relief flood her body like a warm wave. Impotent. That meant he wouldn't touch her, wouldn't demand anything from her. It would just be a business arrangement, cold and distant, where she'd fulfill her role as a wife on paper but never in bed. He won't want anything from me, she repeated to herself as she walked down the aisle, her eyes fixed on the altar ahead. This is just an agreement. I'll be safe. Safe. What a strange word to describe a marriage. Her family was on the brink of bankruptcy. The Martinez company, once a symbol of prestige, now bled debts and scandals. Vincent had offered the solution. Enough money to save everything. In return, he wanted a wife. Someone elegant, discreet, who wouldn't ask questions. Elena was the perfect candidate, or perhaps the only one desperate enough to accept. She raised her eyes, and for the first time, really saw him. Vincent stood beside the altar, hands clasped in front of his body, broad shoulders filling out his dark suit with a presence that seemed to suck the air from the church. He wasn't smiling, showed no nervousness, just watched. And when his eyes met hers, Elena felt something strange run down her spine. He doesn't look fragile. Vincent Harrington was everything but what she expected. Tall to man, absurdly tall, with shoulders that suggested contained strength and a posture that exuded absolute control. His face was angular, marked by a firm jawline and dark eyes that seemed to pierce through any mask someone dared to wear. There was something dangerous about him, something that made Elena's heart beat faster, and not from fear. Or maybe it was fear. She didn't know anymore. He's impotent, she whispered to herself, like a mantra. He won't touch me. But then, why did his gaze make her feel exposed? The ceremony was quick and mechanical. The priest's words seemed distant, as if coming from underwater. Elena repeated the vows without feeling, her voice steady, only because she had rehearsed. Vincent, beside her, spoke with unsettling calm, each word leaving his lips as if it were a promise sealed in stone. "I do," he said, and his deep voice reverberated throughout the entire church. When it came time to sign the register, Vincent held the pen with long, steady fingers. Eleanor watched, mesmerized, as he signed his name with impeccable handwriting. Then he extended the pen to her. Their fingers touched. It was only a second, maybe less, but Elena felt it. The warmth of his skin, the firmness of his touch, the way Vincent's fingers seemed to wrap around hers with a gentleness that contrasted with all that commanding presence. She pulled her hand back too quickly. Vincent said nothing, but she saw the corner of his lips curve just a millimeter. He noticed. The reception was held in an adjacent hall, decorated with white flowers and crystal chandeliers that cast golden light over the guests. Elena smiled politely, greeted people she barely knew, and pretended this was a real wedding. Vincent remained by her side, a silent and imposing presence, nodding briefly to acquaintances, but never really moving away from her. During the toast, he held his champagne flute with one hand and with the other, lightly touched the small of Elena's back. The touch was so subtle she almost thought she'd imagined it. But then she felt it. His warm palm against the thin fabric of her dress, his fingers firm, possessive, as if marking territory. Elena swallowed hard, trying to maintain her composure as the guests raised their glasses and toasted to the happy couple. "Why does this make me nervous?" She dared to look at him. Vincent kept his gaze fixed ahead, his face impassive, but there was something about the way his hand remained on her back. Something that said he knew exactly the effect he was having. "Are you all right?" he asked, his voice low, almost a whisper by her ear. His warm breath brushed against her skin, and Elena shivered. "I am," she answered too quickly. "Are you sure?" Vincent tilted his head slightly, his dark eyes sliding to hers. "You seem tense." "It's just tiredness," she lied. He didn't respond, just kept looking at her, with that disturbing intensity, as if he could read every thought passing through her mind. Elena looked away, pretending interest in the decorations, but her heart beat unevenly. He's strong. He's attractive. Why does this scare me? The night progressed in a blur of empty conversations and forced smiles. When it was finally time to leave, Vincent guided her to the car with his hand still on her back, that constant touch, almost casual, but impossible to ignore. In the back seat of the limousine, the silence between them was thick. Elena looked out the window, watching the city lights pass by, while Vincent remained motionless beside her, legs slightly apart, arms crossed, taking up space as if it were natural for him to dominate any environment. "You looked beautiful today," he said suddenly. Elena turned her head, surprised. Vincent wasn't looking at her. His eyes were fixed on the window, but there was something about the way he said it, unhurried, effortless, that made her stomach knot. "Thank you," she murmured. He finally looked at her, and the corner of his mouth curved again. "You don't need to thank me, it's just the truth." Eleanor's heart raced. "He won't touch me," she repeated mentally, desperately. "He's impotent. This is just an agreement." But when Vincent leaned his body slightly toward her, closing the space between them, Elena realized something terrifying. She no longer knew if she wanted that rumor to be true. The hotel suite was absurdly luxurious. Italian marble floors, floor-to-ceiling windows with a view of the illuminated city. A king-size bed covered in white satin sheets that seemed to glow under the soft light of the lamps. Everything in that space breathed power, control, and money, exactly like Vincent Harrington. Helena entered first, her heels echoing in the silence as she took in her surroundings. There were red roses strategically scattered around the room, a bottle of champagne chilling in a silver bucket, and 2 crystal flutes beside it. The perfect setting for a wedding night. Except this wouldn't be a real wedding night. "He won't touch me," she repeated to herself, clutching her small purse against her body as if it were a shield. Vincent entered right behind her, closing the door with a soft click that seemed to echo too loudly. He removed his suit jacket with slow, deliberate movements, hanging it carefully on the back of a chair. Then he began unbuttoning his shirt cuffs, rolling up the sleeves to his elbows. Elena watched, unable to look away. His forearms were strong, marked by visible veins that suggested contained strength. His hands, those hands that had touched her back during the reception, were large, with long, precise fingers. For a man who supposedly can't, she cut off the thought before it could complete itself. "Would you like some champagne?" Vincent asked, his voice breaking the silence. "No, thank you," Elena answered too quickly, her voice coming out higher than intended. He raised an eyebrow, but didn't insist. Instead, he poured himself a glass, taking a slow sip while watching her over the rim of the crystal. Those dark eyes didn't blink, didn't look away. Just watched. "You're nervous," he stated, didn't ask. "I'm not. You're lying." Elena felt her face heat up. She set her purse down on a nearby armchair and crossed her arms, trying to appear more confident than she felt. It's been a long day," she said, avoiding his gaze. Vincent placed his glass on the table and took a few steps toward her. Not many, just enough to close the distance between them, so that Elena could feel his presence filling the space around her. "Elena," he said, and there was something about the way he pronounced her name that made each syllable seem deliberate, almost intimate. "I'm not going to touch you tonight." She looked up, surprised. "You don't need to be afraid of me," he continued, his voice low and steady. "I know this marriage wasn't your choice. It wasn't either of our choices, really. but I'm not the kind of man who forces anything." Elena should have felt relieved. That was exactly what she wanted to hear. And yet, something inside her twisted in a strange way. "Thank you," she murmured, not knowing what else to say. Vincent tilted his head slightly, studying her. "But," he added, and the word hung in the air like an unfulfilled promise, "that doesn't mean I won't want to." Elena's heart jumped. "What?" He gave a half-smile, small, controlled, but devastating. "Good night, Elena," was all he said before turning and walking toward the bathroom, closing the door behind him with a soft click. Elena stood in the middle of the suite, her heart beating so loudly it seemed to fill all the silence around her. "That doesn't mean I won't want to." What the hell did that mean? She changed quickly, putting on the silk nightgown the hotel had left folded on the bed. A welcome gift for the newlyweds. The fabric was thin, almost translucent, sliding over her skin like water. Eleanor looked at her own reflection in the mirror and frowned. The nightgown was beautiful, but too revealing. He said he wasn't going to touch me. It doesn't matter what I'm wearing. Still, she grabbed the robe hanging in the closet and put it on over the nightgown, tying the belt tightly. When Vincent came out of the bathroom, Elena was sitting on the edge of the bed, hands clasped in her lap, trying to appear calm. He wore only black silk pajama pants, his chest completely bare. Elena choked. Good God. He was absurdly well built. His chest broad and defined, his abdominal muscles carved almost sculpturally, his powerful shoulders that seemed to have been sculpted from marble. There was a thin trail of dark hair running down from his chest until it disappeared at his waistband. Elena forced herself to look away, but it was too late. He'd already noticed. "Is there a problem?" Vincent asked, his voice loaded with something she couldn't decipher. "No," she answered too quickly, her face burning. He crossed the room with slow, confident steps, stopping beside the bed, on the opposite side from her. Elena watched as he adjusted the pillows, pulled back the sheet, and lay down, propping his head on one hand while watching her. "Are you going to sleep in the robe?" he asked, and there was a trace of amusement in his voice. "I'm cold," she lied. "You're not." Eleanor pressed her lips together, but didn't respond. Instead, she lay down on the other side of the bed, keeping a safe distance between them, turning her back to him. The silence that followed was suffocating. She could hear her own breathing, too fast, and felt his presence, warm, solid, impossible to ignore, just inches away. "Eleanor," Vincent said softly. "Yes?" She didn't turn around. "You can relax. I promised I wouldn't touch you." "I am relaxed," she lied again. There was a pause. "Then why are you holding that pillow like your life depends on it?" Eleanor realized that she was, in fact, clutching the pillow against her chest hard enough to make her fingers ache. She released it slowly, but didn't turn around. "Good night, Vincent." "Good night, my wife." The way he said those last two words, low, almost possessive, made something twist in Elena's stomach. She squeezed her eyes shut, trying to calm her racing heart. "He's impotent. He won't do anything. You're safe." But when she finally began to fall asleep, in the early hours of the morning, the last thing she thought about was the way Vincent had looked at her when she came out of the bathroom. As if she were the most fascinating thing he'd ever seen. As if he wanted to devour her whole. And the most terrifying part? She no longer knew if she wanted him to stay away. Eleanor woke with the feeling that something had changed, though she couldn't identify exactly what. Morning light filtered through the sheer curtains, painting the suite in soft, golden tones. She turned her head slowly and found the other side of the bed empty, the sheet still marked by the shape of Vincent's body. He'd already gotten up. She let out a breath she didn't know she'd been holding. Part of her, a small, treacherous part, felt a pang of disappointment. "Idiot," she scolded herself. "You should be relieved." The sound of running water came from the bathroom. Elena took advantage of the moment of privacy to get up, walk to the window and take in the view. The city stretched out before her like a carpet of glass and concrete, morning traffic already beginning to pulse through the streets below. Everything seemed so normal, so ordinary, as if her life hadn't completely changed in the last 24 hours, as if she hadn't woken up next to a stranger who was now her husband. The bathroom door opened. Elena turned instinctively and felt the air escape from her lungs. Vincent stood in the doorway, a towel wrapped low around his hips, droplets of water still glistening on his bare chest. His dark hair was damp, falling slightly over his forehead, and there was something almost vulnerable about the image, if not for the way he watched her with that intensity that made her stomach clench. "Good morning," he said, his voice still rough with sleep. "Good morning," Elena managed to reply, forcing herself to look away, but not before seeing the corner of his mouth curve into an almost imperceptible smile. He knows exactly the effect he has. Vincent walked to the suitcase on a chair and began choosing his clothes for the day with unhurried movements, as if being half naked in front of her was the most natural thing in the world. Elena kept her eyes fixed on the window, pretending absolute fascination with the urban landscape. "Did you sleep well?" he asked casually. "Yes," she lied. In truth, she'd spent half the night awake, hyper-aware of Vincent's deep, regular breathing, the heat emanating from his body, even with the distance between them, the way he'd murmured something unintelligible in his sleep and turned toward her. "That's good," Vincent replied, and she could hear the smile in his voice. "He knows I'm lying." The following days unfolded in a strange dance of proximity and distance. Officially, they were on their honeymoon, a week at an exclusive seaside resort, away from curious eyes and family pressure. But the reality was very different from what Elena had imagined. Vincent was attentive, absurdly attentive. He asked what she wanted for breakfast and memorized her preferences. He held doors open for her. He placed his hand on the small of her back whenever they walked together. He pulled out chairs for her to sit. Small gestures that should have been just courtesy, but seemed to carry something more. Something that made Elena's skin tingle every time he touched her. And he touched her frequently, never invasively, never too much, but always enough to remind her that he was there, that she was his, at least on paper. On the third day, they were walking along the beach at sunset. The sky was painted in shades of orange and pink, the sound of the waves creating a hypnotic soundtrack. Elena had taken off her shoes and was walking on the wet sand, feeling the cold, rough texture beneath her bare feet. Vincent walked beside her, hands in the pockets of his white linen pants, eyes fixed on the horizon. He seemed relaxed, more than Elena had ever seen him. Without the impeccable suit, without the rigid business posture, he almost seemed human. "Can I ask you a question?" Elena said suddenly, surprising herself. Vincent turned his head toward her, one eyebrow raised. "Of course. Why did you agree to this marriage?" The words came out before she could censor them. "I mean, you don't need money. You don't need connections. So why?" Vincent stopped walking. Elena stopped too, turning to face him. The wind tousled his hair, and the golden light of the sunset highlighted the strong angles of his face. "You think I need to have a reason?" he asked, his voice low. "Everyone has a reason." He took a step toward her. Just one. But it was enough to completely change the energy between them. "Maybe I was just tired of being alone," he said, and there was something dangerously honest in those words. Elena felt her heart tighten. "So, any woman would do?" Vincent tilted his head, studying her. "If it were any woman, I would have chosen someone who didn't challenge me with every look." He took another step. Now he was so close that Elena had to lift her chin to face him. "Someone who wouldn't stay awake all night trying to figure out if I'm dangerous or not." Elena swallowed hard. "And are you?" she whispered. "Dangerous?" Vincent raised his hand slowly, so slowly that Elena had all the time in the world to step back if she wanted. But she didn't step back. His fingers touched her face with a gentleness that contrasted absurdly with all that commanding presence. He brushed away a strand of hair that the wind had blown over her eyes, sliding his fingertips along her temple, her cheek, until reaching her jawline. "It depends," he murmured, his voice hoarse, "on what you consider dangerous." The touch was light, almost nothing, but Elena felt as if every nerve ending in her body had awakened at once. She could barely breathe. "Vincent," his name came out as a trembling whisper. "Tell me," he ordered softly, his dark eyes fixed on hers. I don't know what to think of you." His mouth curved into a smile, small, controlled, but absolutely devastating. "Good," he said, letting his hand fall slowly. "Then we're even." He walked away, continuing along the beach, as if nothing had happened, leaving Elena standing in the sand, her heart racing and her skin still tingling where he had touched. That night, Elena took a long shower, letting the hot water wash away the tension accumulated in her muscles. But nothing seemed capable of washing away the feeling of Vincent's fingers on her face, the way he had looked at her, the silent promise that seemed to hover between them. When she came out of the bathroom, wrapped only in a towel, she found a new nightgown on the bed, not the silk one from the hotel. This one was different. White, lacy, shorter, more revealing. A gift, she realized, from Vincent. She should have ignored it, should have put on the pajamas she'd brought from home. But something, maybe curiosity, maybe defiance, maybe something more dangerous, made her pick up the nightgown and put it on. The fabric slid over her skin like a caress, molding to her body in an almost indecent way. Elena looked at her own reflection in the mirror and felt her face heat up. This is crazy, but she didn't take it off. When she opened the bathroom door, Vincent was sitting in the armchair near the window, a book open in his hands. He looked up at the sound and stopped. The book slowly slipped from his hands, closing with a soft sound. Vincent didn't move, but Elena saw the way his jaw clenched, how his fingers gripped the arms of the chair, how his eyes darkened as they traveled over her body from top to bottom, lingering on every curve, on every inch of exposed skin. Elena began, but her voice failed. Vincent stood slowly, like a predator unfolding into movement. He said nothing, just looked. And Elena realized something terrifying. She wanted him to break his promise. She wanted him to cross the room. She wanted those strong hands to touch her the way his eyes were touching her now. But Vincent just took a deep breath, looked away, and said, his voice hoarse and tense, "Good night, Elena." And when he lay down, turning his back to her, Elena felt something worse than fear. She felt disappointment. The morning started with an uncomfortable silence. Elena woke before Vincent and dressed quickly, choosing a light summer dress that covered much more than the nightgown from the previous night. She could still feel the burn of his gaze on her skin, the way he had deliberately turned away, rejecting the silent invitation she didn't even know she was extending. Idiot, she thought to herself for the 1000th time. What did you expect? Vincent was doing exactly what he'd promised, not touching her, keeping his distance, being respectful. So why the hell did that leave her feeling so frustrated? When he woke, they exchanged only basic pleasantries. He asked if she'd slept well. She lied that she had. He suggested having breakfast on the terrace. She agreed. All very polite, very civilized, very empty. But then, as they walked through the hotel corridor, something changed. A maid rushed out of a room carrying a tall stack of towels, not looking where she was going. Elena didn't see in time. Her foot slipped on the polished marble, and she felt her balance give way. Before she could fall, strong arms wrapped around her waist, pulling her back with controlled force that took the air from her lungs. "Careful," Vincent murmured against her ear, his voice low and hoarse. Elena was pressed against his chest, her back glued to Vincent's solid, warm body. She could feel every muscle, every hard line, every deep breath he took. His hands were firm on her waist, large, warm, possessive. "I thank you," she managed to say, her voice coming out shaky. "Steady?" he asked, but didn't release her immediately. Elena nodded, unable to form words. The heat from his body seemed to burn through the thin fabric of her dress, marking her skin. She felt Vincent's fingers contract slightly on her waist before he finally released her, but with deliberate slowness, as if memorizing the sensation. When she turned to face him, Vincent's eyes were darker than ever. "More careful next time," he said, but there was something in his voice that had nothing to do with concern for her safety. Elena just nodded, unable to trust her own voice. Breakfast on the terrace should have been relaxing. The view was stunning, the ocean stretching infinitely, waves breaking softly on the white sand, seagulls dancing in the blue sky. But Elena could barely appreciate it. She was hyper-aware of Vincent's every movement, the way he held his coffee cup, how his lips touched the rim of the glass, how his long fingers leafed through the morning paper. "You seem distracted," Vincent commented, without looking up from the newspaper. "Just thoughtful," Elena replied, stabbing a piece of fruit with more force than necessary. Thinking about what? About you. About why your touch still burns on my skin. About why I want you to hold me that way again. Nothing specific, she lied. Vincent folded the newspaper slowly and watched her with that intensity that made her stomach turn. You know you're a terrible liar, don't you? Elena felt her face heat up. And you're a mind reader? I don't need to read minds when your face tells everything. My face doesn't tell anything, she retorted, lifting her chin defiantly. Vincent leaned across the table, closing the distance between them. The movement was subtle, but Elena felt it like an electric shock. Your eyes tell, he said quietly. The way you bite your lip when you're nervous tells. The way your breathing quickens when I get close definitely tells. Elena couldn't breathe. You don't need to deny it, Vincent interrupted, a small smile curving his lips. I like knowing that I affect you. Before Elena could respond or explode from embarrassment, he stood and extended his hand. Come on, I want to show you something. She hesitated for just a second before placing her hand in his. Vincent's fingers closed around hers, warm and firm, and something inside Elena both quieted and awakened at the same time. Vincent took her to the resort's private beach. There was a small sailboat anchored in the shallow water, swaying gently with the rhythm of the waves. Elena looked at the boat and then at him, suspicious. You know how to sail? Of course, he replied, as if it were obvious. Of course he does, Elena thought. Of course he's perfect at everything. Getting on the boat proved more complicated than Elena expected. The plank connecting the dock to the boat was narrow and slippery. She took the first step carefully, but felt her balance waver when the boat rocked. Instantly, Vincent's hands were on her waist again, firm and secure. Slowly, he murmured, so close that she felt his warm breath against her neck. I've got you. Elena had no choice but to trust him. She took another step, then another, with Vincent's hands guiding her, keeping her stable. When she was finally safely aboard, he didn't release her immediately. His fingers remained on her waist for a few more seconds, long enough for Elena to feel his thumb trace a small circle against the fabric of her dress. A touch so subtle it could have been accidental, but Elena knew it wasn't. When she turned to face him, Vincent was already moving away, preparing the sails with efficient, confident movements. As if nothing had happened, as if he hadn't just made her heart race with a simple touch. The sailing was surprisingly peaceful. Vincent maneuvered the boat with natural confidence, and Elena found herself watching him, the way the muscles in his arms contracted when he pulled the ropes, how the wind tousled his dark hair, how his eyes gleamed in the sunlight. Want to learn? He asked suddenly. What? To sail. Elena hesitated. I don't know if... Come here, Vincent ordered softly, signaling for her to approach the helm. Elena obeyed, and when she got close, Vincent positioned himself behind her, completely enveloping her. His arms extended on either side of her body, his hands covering hers on the helm. Do you feel it? He murmured against her ear. And Elena no longer knew if he was talking about the boat or something completely different. She could barely breathe. Vincent's body was pressed against her back, solid, warm, impossible to ignore. She could feel his heart beating against her shoulder blade, or maybe it was her own heart, she didn't know anymore. I feel it, she whispered, and the words came out loaded with much more meaning than intended. Vincent's hands tightened over hers, his fingers intertwining briefly. He tilted his head, and Elena felt his lips brush lightly against her hair, so lightly it could have been just the wind. But it wasn't. Vincent! His name came out like a sigh. Yes? His voice was hoarse, tense. She didn't know what she wanted to say. Didn't know what she was asking for. Before she could find the words, a stronger gust of wind made the boat rock. Vincent held her more firmly, stabilizing her, and the moment broke. But the feeling remained, burning, insistent, impossible to ignore. When they returned to the hotel, it was late afternoon. Elena took a long shower, trying to calm her confused thoughts and her body that seemed to vibrate with contained energy. She put on another nightgown, this one less provocative, safer, and came out of the bathroom determined to keep her distance. Vincent was on the balcony, leaning on the railing, watching the sunset. He wasn't wearing a shirt, just pajama pants hanging low on his hips, and the golden light of dusk highlighted every line and contour of his body. Elena should have stayed in the room, should have lain down and pretended to be asleep. But instead, she found herself walking to the balcony, stopping beside him. They stood in silence for a long moment, just watching the sky change from gold to pink, then to purple. "Eleanor," Vincent said finally without looking at her. "Yes? I need you to understand something." She turned her head to look at him and was surprised to see the tension in his face. His jaw clenched, the muscles in his neck tight. "I promised not to touch you," he continued, his voice low and controlled. "And I always keep my promises. But you need to stop looking at me that way." "What way?" Elena whispered, though she knew exactly what he was talking about. Vincent finally looked at her, and his eyes were almost black. "Like you want me to break that promise." Elena's heart stopped. "What if I do?" The words came out before she could censor them. Vincent closed his eyes for a second, breathing deeply. When he opened them again, there was something wild there, something he was clearly fighting to control. "Don't play with this," he said, his voice dangerously low. "I'm not playing." They stood there, just inches apart, the air between them vibrating with possibilities. Elena could see the struggle happening on Vincent's face, control versus desire, promise versus will. And then slowly, he raised his hand. His fingers touched her face with reverent gentleness, tracing the line of her jaw, moving down her neck, stopping at her racing pulse. He held there for a moment, his thumb pressed against the skin where her heart beat wildly. "Are you sure?" he murmured. "And it wasn't a question. That you want to awaken this in me?" Elena couldn't speak, just nodded. Vincent smiled, a dark, promising, dangerous smile, and then slowly, so slowly it was torture, he began to close the distance between them. The kiss didn't happen. At the last second, Vincent's phone rang, shrill and insistent, breaking the moment like shattered glass. He pulled back immediately, his jaw clenched in frustration as he answered the call. It was work. It was always work. Elena watched him speak in a dry, professional tone, all that intensity from seconds ago evaporating into corporate formality. When he hung up, the moment had passed. Vincent murmured an apology and went back inside, leaving Elena alone on the balcony with her heart still racing and an inexplicable emptiness in her chest. They didn't talk about it the next morning. The honeymoon ended too soon. 7 days that felt like both an eternity and the blink of an eye. When they returned to reality, to the city, to obligations, to families, Eleanor felt like she was waking from a confusing dream where the lines between real and imagined had completely blurred. The first social obligation was a brunch at the Harrington family mansion. Vincent's mother, Evelyn, had insisted on properly introducing the new daughter-in-law to the extended family. Elena knew it wasn't an invitation, but a summons. The Harrington mansion was everything Eleanor expected: imposing, opulent, cold. White columns flanked the entrance, perfectly manicured gardens stretched in all directions, and the interior seemed to have come straight out of an architecture magazine. Everything in neutral tones, modern art on the walls, furniture too expensive to be comfortable. "Breathe," Vincent murmured in her ear as they climbed the entrance steps, his hand firm and reassuring on the small of her back. Elena tried. But when the door opened, and she saw the number of people gathered in the main hall, all impeccably dressed, all watching her with barely disguised curiosity, she felt her stomach turn. Evelyn Harrington was everything Elena imagined. Tall, elegant, with perfectly styled blonde hair and a smile that didn't reach her cold eyes. She greeted Elena with 2 air kisses, the kind of gesture that seemed cordial but was calculatedly distant. "Welcome to the family, dear," Evelyn said, her voice sweet as poisoned honey. I hope Vincent behaved himself during the honeymoon. There was something in the way she said it, a subtle insinuation that made Elena stiffen. "He was perfect," Elena replied, forcing a smile. "What a surprise," a female voice commented from across the room, too low to be accidental, too high not to be heard. Eleanor turned her head and saw a small group of women, Vincent's cousins she presumed, whispering among themselves while watching her. One of them, a blonde in a designer dress and expensive jewelry, smiled with false sweetness when their eyes met. "Come, Elena," Evelyn said, guiding her to the center of the hall. "Let me introduce you to everyone." The following minutes were a blur of names she wouldn't remember and faces that all seemed to have the same expression of polite judgment. Uncles, cousins, family, friends, all greeted with superficial courtesy, while evaluating her from head to toe. Elena felt like a specimen being examined under a microscope. Vincent remained by her side during most of the introductions, a silent but protective presence. But eventually his father pulled him into a conversation about business, leaving Elena alone in the midst of a sea of strangers. That's when she heard it. Obviously it was for the money. Her family was bankrupt, you know. Elena froze. The voice came from behind a decorative screen near the bar. She recognized the tone. It was the blonde cousin from before. "Well, she got the right husband for that," another voice responded with a low laugh. "At least Vincent won't demand much from her, if you know what I mean." God, it's so sad. Imagine marrying a man who can't even... Shh, not so loud. Please, everyone knows. It's practically an open secret. Poor Vincent is incapable. And she's probably grateful for it. At least she gets the money without having to fulfill marital duties. The laughter that followed was cruel, cutting. Elena felt something burn in her chest, a mixture of anger, humiliation, and something deeper. Pain. Pain for Vincent, for her, for this whole absurd situation. She didn't realize she was gripping the champagne flute so hard until the base cracked in her hand. "Damn," she whispered, watching the fizzy liquid drip between her fingers. "Are you okay?" Vincent's voice appeared beside her, immediately concerned. Elena turned to him, and something in her expression must have given away what she'd just heard, because Vincent's eyes darkened. "What happened?" he asked quietly, taking her hand to check for any cuts. "Nothing," she lied, but her voice came out shaky. "Elena, I just need some air." Before he could stop her, Elena crossed the hall toward the back exit, ignoring the curious looks that followed her. She pushed through the glass doors and stepped into the garden, breathing deeply the fresh air. "They think you married for money. They think he's broken, useless. They think you made a cowardly deal." Tears burned her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. "Elena." Vincent's voice was firm behind her. "What happened in there?" She didn't turn around. "Why do you let them?" she asked, her voice coming out louder than intended. "Why do you let everyone say those things about you?" There was a pause. "What things?" Elena turned abruptly, finally facing him. "That you're impotent, that you're not a real man, that our marriage is a joke because you can't even..." She swallowed hard, unable to complete the sentence. "Why do you let that rumor exist?" Vincent remained motionless, his face impassive. But there was something in his eyes, something dark and dangerous. "People believe what they want," he said calmly. "That's not an answer. It's the only one I have." Elena took a step toward him, frustration and confusion overflowing. "I need to know the truth, Vincent. I need to know if..." She took a deep breath. "If all of this has been a lie from the beginning." He took a step toward her, eliminating the distance between them in one fluid movement. His eyes were fixed on hers, too intense to bear. "You want to know the truth?" he asked, his voice low and dangerous. "Yes." Vincent raised his hand, his fingers touching her chin and making her lift her face to look at him completely. "The truth," he murmured, "is that I let everyone believe that lie because it was convenient, because it gave me peace, because it kept people like them," he gestured vaguely toward the mansion, "away from me." Elena could barely breathe. "But then you showed up," Vincent continued, his thumb tracing the line of her jaw, "with your defiant eyes and your determination to stay distant. And suddenly that convenient lie became problematic." "Why?" Elena whispered. Vincent leaned in, bringing his face close to hers until their breaths mingled. "Because I want you, Elena," he said, each word deliberate and loaded with meaning. "I want you in every way a man can want a woman, and that damn lie is the only thing stopping me from showing you exactly how capable I am." Elena's heart stopped and then raced. "Then show me," she challenged, her voice trembling but firm. Vincent's eyes darkened until they were almost black. His hand slid from her chin to the nape of her neck, his fingers tangling in her hair. Not here, he said, his voice hoarse. When I show you, Elena, it won't be in a garden where my family can interrupt us. It will be in a place where I can take all the time in the world to prove every word I just said. He pulled her closer, pressing his forehead against hers. And when that happens, he whispered, you'll understand why I let that lie exist. Because once I really touch you, once I have you completely, there'll be no going back. For either of us. Elena trembled, and it had nothing to do with the cold. I'm not afraid, she lied. Vincent smiled, a dark, promising, absolutely devastating smile. You should be. Before Elena could respond, Evelyn's voice echoed from inside the mansion, calling them back. Vincent pulled back slowly, his fingers sliding through her hair before releasing her completely. Let's go, he said, offering his arm. Let's give them what they expect to see. Eleanor placed her hand on his arm, still trembling from the words he had said, from the promises he had made. When they returned to the hall, she noticed that all eyes were on them, the cousins whispering, Evelyn watching with a calculating expression. But Eleanor didn't care anymore, because now she knew the truth. And the truth was infinitely more dangerous than any lie. The days after the brunch at the Harrington mansion were strange. Vincent was more distant, not cold, but cautious, as if he were maintaining a deliberate distance. He left early for the office and came back late, always with excuses about meetings and urgent contracts. Elena knew it wasn't a lie, he really was busy. But she also knew there was something more. He was avoiding being alone with her, avoiding the promise he had made in the garden. Elena should have felt relieved. After all, wasn't that what she'd wanted from the beginning? Distance, safety, a marriage on paper only. But instead of relief, all she felt was empty, and maybe, just maybe, a touch of frustration. The following Saturday, Evelyn organized an intimate dinner, which, in Harrington vocabulary, meant 50 guests, 5 courses, and enough tension to cut with a knife. Vincent had no choice but to attend, and Elena, as his wife, didn't either. She chose a navy blue dress that hugged her curves elegantly but not daringly, pinned her hair in a low bun, and applied enough makeup to look confident. When she came down the stairs of the penthouse she now shared with Vincent, he was waiting in the entrance hall, and the way he looked at her made all the effort worthwhile. His eyes traveled over her body slowly, very slowly, lingering on every detail before finally meeting hers. There was hunger in that look. Raw, barely disguised hunger. You look beautiful, he said, his voice hoarse. Thank you, Elena replied, trying to sound casual despite her racing heart. Vincent took a step toward her, and for a moment Elena thought he was going to touch her. But he just offered his arm, maintaining that safe and frustrating distance. Let's go. My mother hates delays. The dinner started as expected, formal, boring, full of empty conversations about business and politics. Elena was sitting next to Vincent, smiling politely, while an old, boring executive rambled on about the stock market. That's when she appeared. Vanessa. Elena recognized her immediately, even having never seen her before. Something about the way the woman entered the room, with steps too confident, a smile too possessive, eyes that went straight to Vincent, with a familiarity that made Elena's stomach turn. She was stunning. Dark brown hair falling in perfect waves over bare shoulders, a red dress that seemed to have been painted on her body, full lips curved in a smile that promised trouble. Vincent, darling, Vanessa purred, approaching their table with the grace of a panther. It's been so long. Eleanor felt Vincent stiffen beside her. Vanessa, he said, his tone carefully neutral. I didn't know you'd be here. Your mother invited me, Vanessa replied, and her eyes finally slid to Eleanor with a cold assessment. You must be the wife. Eleanor, right? Yes, Eleanor replied, keeping her voice steady. And you are? Vanessa Carmichael. Vincent and I are old friends. The pause before friends was deliberate, loaded with insinuation. Ex-fiancé, Eleanor realized with a jolt. This was Vincent's ex-fiancé. Nice to meet you, Elena lied. Vanessa smiled, a smile that didn't reach her eyes, and pulled out a chair, sitting on the other side of Vincent without being invited. So, how's married life, Vince? She asked, using an intimate nickname that made Elena want to flip the table. Everything you expected. Better, Vincent replied dryly. How wonderful. Vanessa picked up a wine glass and took a slow sip, her eyes never leaving Vincent's face. You know, Vince and I almost got married a few years ago. We were engaged for almost a year before I realized it wouldn't work out. Eleanor felt each word like a subtle stab. Really? She said, keeping her tone polite. And why didn't it work out? Vanessa tilted her head, pretending to consider the question. Let's say that there were certain incompatibilities. Her eyes gleamed with malice. But I'm sure Vincent told you all about that. The insinuation was clear. Brutal, designed to wound. Elena felt anger rise in her throat like bile, but before she could respond, Vincent's hand found hers under the table, his fingers intertwining forcefully. Vanessa, Vincent said, his voice low and dangerous. Careful. With what, darling? Vanessa smiled innocently. I'm just making conversation. The dinner that followed was torture. Vanessa seemed to have made it her mission to monopolize Vincent's attention, touching his arm casually, laughing too loud at things that weren't funny, sharing intimate memories of when they were together with a familiarity that made Elena want to scream. And the worst part? Vincent was being polite, maintaining his composure, not pushing her away rudely because that would be classless. But every touch of Vanessa's on his arm, every look loaded with shared history, every word whispered too close to his ear made something dark and ugly grow in Eleanor's chest. Jealousy. She was jealous, violently, painfully jealous, and she hated every second of it. When they finally got home, Elena was boiling inside. She entered the penthouse like a storm, throwing her purse on the couch and turning to face Vincent. What was that? She demanded. Vincent closed the door, his expression carefully controlled. That was Vanessa being Vanessa. And you just let her. What did you want me to do, cause a scene in front of 50 people? I wanted you to put her in her place, Elena exploded, her voice coming out louder than intended. She spent the entire dinner touching you, flirting with you, acting like I wasn't even there. I noticed, Vincent said calmly, but there was tension in his jaw. And you did nothing. I held your hand all night. That wasn't enough. Elena felt tears of frustration burn her eyes, but refused to let them fall. She made it very clear that you and that you had something real, and that I'm just what? Vincent took a step toward her, his eyes darkening. A convenient substitute. The silence that followed was deafening. Vincent stood completely still for a long moment, just watching her. Then slowly, he began walking toward her with deliberate steps. You really believe that? He asked, his voice dangerously low. I don't know what to believe. Eleanor backed up until her back touched the wall. Everyone keeps saying that you can't. And then she shows up acting like she knows things about you that I'll never know. Vincent stopped inches from her, his hands pressed against the wall on either side of her head, trapping her. You want to know what Vanessa knows? He asked, his face so close that Elena could see the golden flecks in his dark eyes. Yes, she knows I'm ambitious, that I work too hard, that I'm not easy to deal with. He leaned closer, his lips almost touching hers. But you know what she doesn't know. What? Elena whispered, her breath failing. How I get when I really want someone. His voice was hoarse, loaded with promise. She never saw me lose control, never drove me crazy the way you do. Eleanor's heart beat so hard she was sure he could hear it. Vincent, you're jealous, he observed, and there was dark satisfaction in his voice. I saw it. The way you looked at her every time she touched me, the way your jaw clenched, how you gripped your glass. So what? Elena challenged, trying to sound stronger than she felt. So, Vincent smiled, that dark, dangerous smile that made her stomach turn. I like it. You like it? Very much. He raised one hand, his fingers tracing the line of her jaw, moving down her neck until stopping at her racing pulse. Because it means you care. It means that this here, he gestured between them, is no longer just a business arrangement for you. Elena couldn't breathe, couldn't think. And you were right about one thing, Vincent continued, his voice getting even lower, more dangerous. I let everyone believe that lie. Let everyone talk as if I were broken, useless, incapable. His fingers slid from her neck to her waist, pulling her slightly against him. "But you know why it bothers you so much, Elena." He tilted his head, his lips brushing the shell of her ear. "Why it makes you furious?" "Why?" The word came out as a trembling sigh. "Because you don't want it to be true anymore." His teeth lightly captured her earlobe, making her gasp. "Because deep down, you want to know exactly what I can do, what I can make you feel." Elena was trembling, her legs weak, her entire body vibrating with a need she no longer knew how to deny. "Say it," Vincent ordered softly, pulling her even closer until there was no space between their bodies. "Say what you really want." Elena raised her eyes to meet his, dark, intense, full of a hunger that reflected her own. "I want—" She took a deep breath, gathering courage. "I want you to stop keeping your distance. I want you to stop treating me like I'm going to break. I want—" "What?" He pressed, his fingers tightening on her waist. "I want you," she finally confessed, the words coming out in a desperate rush. "I want you to touch me, to show me that all of that is a lie. I can't take this distance anymore, this tension, this game of pretending I don't want you when I—" Vincent kissed her, finally. His lips took hers with a hunger that took the air from her lungs, an intensity that made her knees give way. It wasn't gentle, it wasn't careful. It was desperate, possessive, full of all the tension accumulated over weeks. His hands were everywhere, her hair, her face, her waist, her back, as if he couldn't decide where he wanted to touch her first. Elena clung to his shoulders, returning the kiss with the same ferocity, all the jealousy and frustration transforming into pure need. When they finally pulled apart, both were breathless. "That," Vincent said, his voice hoarse and his eyes darker than she'd ever seen, "was just the beginning." Elena could barely process what had just happened. Her lips still tingled from the pressure of Vincent's kiss. Her entire body vibrated with an energy she'd never felt before. She was pressed against the wall, her hands still gripping his shoulders, her eyes wide as she tried to catch her breath. Vincent remained close, dangerously close, one hand still on her waist, the other braced on the wall beside her head. He watched her with an intensity that made the air seem thick, loaded with possibilities. "Elena," he said, his voice hoarse and loaded with warning. "If you want to stop, you need to tell me now." She stared at him, seeing the struggle happening in his eyes. Control battling against desire, promise against need. He was giving her an out. One last chance to back away before they crossed a line that couldn't be undone. Elena knew she should be sensible, should take a deep breath, step away, maintain the safe distance they'd established from the beginning. But she didn't want safety anymore. She wanted him. "I don't want to stop," she whispered, and saw something dark and primal ignite in his eyes. Vincent closed his eyes for a second, breathing deeply as if gathering the last fragments of control. When he opened them again, there was a decision there, a surrender. "Then come here," he ordered softly, extending his hand. Elena placed her hand in his, and Vincent pulled her against his body with a fluid movement that made her gasp. This time, when he kissed her, it was different. Still intense, still desperate, but there was something more. An exploration, a promise that he had all the time in the world to discover every inch of her. His lips moved against hers with devastating skill, alternating between firm pressure and soft touches that made her tremble. When his tongue asked for entrance, Elena opened for him without hesitation, and the low groan that escaped Vincent's throat made something tighten in her belly. His hands slid down her back, tracing her spine before settling firmly on her waist, pulling her even closer. Elena could feel every hard line of his body pressed against her, every tense muscle, every evidence that the rumors were absolutely, unequivocally false. "God," Vincent murmured against her lips, "you have no idea how long I've wanted to do this." He traced a path of kisses along her jawline, moving down her neck, finding the spot where her pulse beat wildly. When he bit lightly there, Elena couldn't contain the moan that escaped. "Vincent." His name came out as a plea. "I know," he whispered against her skin. "I know, sweetheart, but we're going slow. I want to savor every second of this." He lifted her effortlessly, and Elena instinctively wrapped her legs around his waist. Vincent carried her through the room, kissing her the whole time until they reached the bedroom. When he laid her on the bed with a gentleness that contrasted with the urgency of his kisses, Eleanor felt her heart race. The soft light from the lamp cast golden shadows throughout the room, creating an intimate atmosphere loaded with promises. Vincent stood beside the bed for a moment, just looking at her. Her hair spread on the pillow, her lips swollen from kisses, her chest rising and falling rapidly. "You're so beautiful," he said, his voice hoarse with admiration. "So absurdly beautiful that sometimes it hurts to look at you." Elena felt her face heat up. "You too," she whispered. And it was true. Vincent was devastatingly attractive, all defined muscle, strong lines, commanding presence. He smiled, that dark smile she was beginning to know, and began unbuttoning his shirt slowly. Each button that opened revealed more of his bronzed skin, more of his defined muscles, until finally the shirt slid off his shoulders and fell to the floor. Elena couldn't look away. He was perfect, absolutely perfect. Vincent leaned over her, supporting himself on his arms on either side of her body, trapping her deliciously. "I want you to understand something," he said, his eyes fixed on hers. "I let that lie exist because it was convenient, because it kept people away, because I was tired of games and expectations." He lowered his head, capturing her lips in a slow, deep kiss before continuing. "But with you," he traced the line of her neck with soft kisses. "With you, I want there to be no doubts. No lies, no pretense." His hands found the zipper of her dress, lowering it slowly while his eyes sought permission in hers. "May I?" he asked. "Yes," Elena answered without hesitation. Vincent slid the dress off her shoulders, exposing her pale skin inch by inch, following the path of the fabric with kisses that made Elena arch against him. When the dress finally fell to the floor beside the bed, she was only in lingerie, delicate lace that barely hid anything. Vincent's eyes darkened even more. "You're going to kill me," he murmured, his hands tracing the curve of her waist, moving up her ribs, stopping just below her breasts. "Then die happy," Eleanor said, surprised by her own boldness. Vincent laughed, a low, hoarse sound that reverberated through her. "Oh, I intend to." He lowered his head, capturing a nipple through the thin lace, and Elena arched violently, her hands flying to his hair, holding him there while sensations exploded through her body. "Vincent," she gasped, "please." "Please what?" He raised his head, his eyes gleaming with satisfaction at seeing the effect he was having. "Tell me what you want, Elena. I want to hear it. I want you. Everything. Now." Something wild passed over his face. "No," he said. And when she started to protest, he captured her lips in a kiss that stole any argument. "We're not going to rush. Not this first time. I'm going to touch you in every place I've dreamed of touching. I'm going to kiss you until you forget your own name. And only then, when you're begging, when you can't take another second." He bit her lower lip lightly. "Then I'll give you everything." And he kept his promise. His hands explored every curve, every line, every inch of skin, as if memorizing a map. His lips followed the path of his fingers, leaving trails of fire wherever they passed. He discovered sensitive spots Elena didn't even know existed, behind her knee, the inner curve of her elbow, the space between her ribs. Eleanor lost track of time. All that existed was Vincent, his touch, his mouth, his delicious weight on her. When he finally removed the last fabric barriers between them, when their bodies finally met skin against skin, Eleanor felt like she was burning from the inside out. "Look at me," Vincent ordered softly, and when she obeyed, he whispered, "I let everyone believe that lie to live in peace." He positioned himself at her entrance, his eyes never leaving hers. "But you," he entered slowly, making them both gasp at the intensity of the connection. "You take away my peace. Take away my control. Make me want things I thought I'd never have." Eleanor clung to his shoulders, her nails digging into his skin as he moved with devastating precision. Slow at first, letting her adjust, then deeper, faster, finding a rhythm that left them breathless. "Do you feel this?" he asked, his voice hoarse. "Feel how much I want you, how much you affect me?" "Yes," Elena moaned, lost in the sensation, in the heat, in the way their bodies fit together perfectly. "God, yes." Vincent kissed her deeply, swallowing her moans. their bodies moving together in an ancient and perfect dance. It wasn't just physical. There was something deeper there, something that made Elena's heart squeeze as much as her body. When he slid his hand between them, touching her exactly where she needed it most, Elena shattered. Pleasure exploded through her in waves that left her trembling, Vincent's name escaping her lips like a prayer. Feeling her tighten around him pushed Vincent over the edge. He buried his face in her neck, his muscles tense, and followed her into that fall, whispering her name like a sacred secret. Afterward, when their breathing finally began to normalize, Vincent pulled her into his arms, his fingers tracing lazy patterns on her back. Elena rested her head on his chest, listening to the strong, steady beating of his heart. "This isn't just a marriage of convenience anymore," Vincent said softly, his voice still hoarse. Elena raised her head to look at him, seeing the vulnerability in his eyes. "It never was," she whispered back. He smiled, a genuine smile, without the dark and dangerous edges, just happy. And when he kissed her again, soft and slowly this time, Elena knew that everything had changed. There was no going back. And she didn't want there to be. Elena woke wrapped in warmth. Not the impersonal warmth of sheets or morning sun filtering through curtains, but the living, pulsing warmth of Vincent's body against hers. One of his arms was wrapped possessively around her waist, keeping her pressed against his chest, while his deep, regular breathing caressed her neck. For the first time since they'd gotten married, Elena felt home. She turned carefully, not wanting to wake him but wanting to see his face. In sleep, Vincent looked different, younger, less guarded. The tension lines that usually marked his forehead had softened, and there was something almost vulnerable in the way his dark lashes rested against his cheeks. "He's mine," Elena thought, and the realization hit her with surprising force. Really mine. As if sensing her gaze, Vincent slowly opened his eyes. When their gazes met, he smiled. Not that dark, dangerous smile she knew, but something softer, truer. "Good morning," he murmured, his voice still rough with sleep. "Good morning," Elena whispered back. Vincent raised his hand, brushing a strand of hair from her face with a gentleness that contrasted with the intensity of the previous night. "Are you okay?" he asked, and there was genuine concern in his eyes. Elena felt her heart tighten. "I'm more than okay. No regrets?" "None." She leaned in and kissed him softly. "And you?" Vincent pulled her closer, deepening the kiss until they were both breathless. "My only regret," he murmured against her lips, "is that I waited so long." The days that followed were a revelation. It was as if the dam they'd both built had finally burst, releasing a torrent of emotions that neither of them knew how to contain and no longer wanted to try. Vincent became different. He was still the powerful, controlled businessman at work, but at home with Elena, he let that mask fall. He touched her constantly. Small touches that didn't necessarily lead to anything, but that said, "You're here, you're mine, I need to feel you." A hand on the small of her back when they passed each other in the kitchen, fingers intertwined while watching TV on the couch, a stolen kiss when she least expected it, and the nights. The nights were a constant discovery. Vincent was an attentive lover, almost obsessively focused on her pleasure. He learned her body as if studying for the most important exam of his life, memorizing every touch that made her gasp, every whispered word that made her tremble, every rhythm that took her to the edge. "Tell me you're mine," he'd whisper as he moved inside her, his eyes fixed on hers, waiting for the answer. "I'm yours," Elena would gasp, and each time she said those words, they became more true. It was on a Thursday night, 3 weeks after they'd first surrendered to each other, that everything changed again. Elena was on the penthouse balcony, watching the city lights flicker like earthbound stars, when she felt Vincent's arms wrap around her from behind. He pulled her against his chest, resting his chin on her shoulder. "What are you thinking about?" he asked softly. "About how my life has changed," she answered honestly. "About how I've changed." Vincent turned her in his arms so he could face her. "Changed how?" Elena hesitated, biting her lower lip, a gesture she knew he found irresistible. "I came into this marriage thinking it would just be an arrangement, a cold transaction. I'd play my role, you'd play yours, and we'd live separate lives under the same roof. "And now?" Vincent asked, and there was something vulnerable in his eyes that she rarely saw. "Now I can't imagine my life without you," she confessed, her voice trembling. "I can't imagine waking up without you beside me. I can't imagine not feeling your hands on me, not hearing your voice, not seeing your smile when you think no one's looking." Vincent closed his eyes for a moment, as if her words were a prayer being answered. "Eleanor," he said, opening his eyes again, and there was an intensity there that made her heart stop. "I need to tell you something." "What?" He took a deep breath, and Elena realized he was nervous. Vincent, who always seemed so in control, was nervous. "When I agreed to this marriage, I told myself it was for convenience, that it was a smart business decision, that I could maintain emotional distance and turn this into something mutually beneficial." He raised his hands, cupping them around her face. "But then I saw you at the altar, with those defiant eyes and that raised chin, trying to be brave when I knew you were terrified. And something in me woke up." Elena could barely breathe. "I wanted you," Vincent continued, his thumb tracing her cheek. "From that first moment I wanted you, not just physically, though God knows I did, but I wanted to know you. I wanted to make you smile. I wanted to be the person who took that fear from your eyes. Vincent, I fell in love with you," he said, and the words fell between them like precious stones. "I don't know exactly when it happened. Maybe it was gradual, or maybe it was in that first moment at the altar, but it happened. And now I can't pretend this is just an arrangement anymore." Tears burned Elena's eyes. "I love you," Vincent said, and his voice was full of conviction. "I love you in a way I didn't know I was capable of. You make me want to be better. You make me want to wake up every day just to see your face. You make me believe that maybe I'm not as broken as I thought." "You're not broken," Eleanor whispered, tears finally escaping. "You never were, and you made me realize that." He wiped her tears with his thumbs. "So I need you to know, this isn't a marriage of convenience for me anymore. It's real. You're real. And if you give me the chance, I'll spend the rest of my life proving how much you mean to me." Eleanor couldn't hold back anymore. She pulled him into a desperate kiss, pouring out all the emotions she couldn't express with words, all the love, all the gratitude, all the relief of finally being exactly where she belonged. When they pulled apart, they were both crying. "I love you too," Elena said, the words rushing out. "I love you so much that sometimes it hurts. I love you when you're concentrating on reading contracts. I love you when you make that sound in the back of your throat when you're sleeping. I love you when you're being impossible and stubborn. I just love you." Vincent lifted her in his arms, making her give a small squeal of surprise, and carried her back to the bedroom. But this time, when he laid her on the bed, there was something different in the way he looked at her. It wasn't just desire, it was love, pure and simple. "Let me show you," he whispered, covering her body with his. "Let me show you how much you mean to me." And he showed her. With every reverent touch, every lingering kiss, every slow and deliberate movement, Vincent worshipped her body as if it were a sacred temple. There was no rush this time, no desperate urgency, just the need to be connected, to be one, to celebrate what they'd found in each other. When he entered her, slowly and deeply, his eyes never left hers. "I love you," he whispered with every movement. "I love you," she responded, her hands tracing the lines of his face as if memorizing every detail. They moved together in perfect synchrony, not just their bodies, but their hearts, their souls. When pleasure finally swept over them, it was different from all the other times. Deeper, more complete, more right. Afterward, lying intertwined with each other, sweaty and sated, Vincent kissed her forehead softly. "You're my home," he whispered in the darkness. "You understand that? No matter where I am, if you're there, I'm home." Elena turned in his arms, pressing her face against his chest, listening to the steady beating of his heart. "And you're my safe harbor," she replied. "The thing I didn't know I was looking for until I found you." Vincent held her tighter, and Elena felt something wet touch her forehead. When she looked up, she saw silent tears running down his face. "Hey," she whispered, wiping them away with her fingers. "It's okay." "I know," he said, smiling through the tears. "It's just that I never thought I'd have this, never thought someone would look at me the way you look at me. As if I were enough." "You're more than enough," Eleanor said firmly. "You're everything." They kissed again, slow, sweet, full of silent promises, and when they finally fell asleep, still intertwined, they both knew they'd crossed a threshold from which there was no return. The arrangement had transformed into love. The marriage of convenience had become the beginning of a life they both wanted to build together, and neither of them had any regrets. Happiness has a strange way of making people vulnerable. Elena discovered this in the cruelest way possible. 2 weeks had passed since the night she and Vincent had exchanged declarations of love. 2 weeks of waking in his arms, of shared laughter over breakfast, of stolen glances that said more than words ever could. Elena had never been so happy. And maybe that was exactly why she didn't see the danger coming. It was on a Friday morning that everything started to crumble. Vincent had left early for an important meeting, kissing her lingeringly before leaving and whispering promises about what he'd do with her when he got back. Eleanor was in the living room, having coffee and answering emails on her laptop when the intercom rang. "Mrs. Harrington." The doorman's voice sounded through the system. "There's a Miss Vanessa Carmichael here asking to see you." Eleanor's stomach turned. Vanessa. Part of her wanted to simply refuse, say she wasn't receiving visitors, and let that woman deal with the rejection. But another part, the part that needed to prove to herself that she wasn't afraid, that Vincent was hers now, made her answer, "You can send her up." She regretted it the moment the words left her mouth. 5 minutes later, Vanessa was standing at the penthouse door, wearing an impeccable outfit that probably cost more than Elena's car before the marriage. Her hair was perfectly styled, her makeup flawless, and there was a smile on her lips that didn't come close to reaching her eyes. "Elena," she said as if they were old friends, "so glad you agreed to see me." "Vanessa," Elena replied, keeping her voice steady. "What do you want?" "Straight to the point." "I like that." Vanessa entered without being invited, her heels clicking on the marble floor as she examined the space with critical eyes. "He redecorated. Interesting. When we lived together, he insisted on keeping everything in shades of grey and black." Eleanor felt like she'd been punched in the stomach. "You lived together?" Vanessa turned, and there was triumph in her smile. "Oh dear. Vincent didn't tell you?" She tilted her head, feigning surprise. "We lived together for almost 2 years. Before we got engaged, of course, this penthouse was practically mine too." "Breathe," Eleanor ordered herself. "She's trying to provoke you." "That was in the past," Eleanor said, raising her chin. "And if that's all you came to say, I think you should leave." "Oh, but I didn't come to talk about the past," Vanessa said, opening her designer purse and pulling out an envelope. "I came to talk about the future, or rather, the lack of one." She extended the envelope to Elena, who took it with trembling hands. "What is this?" "Open it and see." With her heart beating wildly, Elena opened the envelope. Inside were several printed photographs. They were all of Vincent and Vanessa, at restaurants, at events, one particularly intimate one showing Vanessa touching Vincent's face while he looked at her. But what made Elena's world stop were the dates printed in the corner of each photo. They were all recent, very recent. "These are from 3 weeks ago," Vanessa said casually, as if commenting on the weather. "A few days before you and Vincent had your marital reconciliation, let's say." Elena felt like the ground was opening beneath her feet. "I don't understand." "Let me clarify then," Vanessa said, and now there was pure venom in her voice. "Vincent and I never really broke up. We just took a break. He accepted this arranged marriage because he needed to consolidate business with your family, but it was always temporary. Always until I decided to come back." "You're lying," Elena whispered, but her voice sounded weak, even to her own ears. "Am I?" Vanessa picked up one of the photos, the one where she was touching Vincent's face. "Why do you think he spread that rumor about being impotent, to keep other women away while he waited for me? To ensure that whatever marriage he made was purely formal, without emotional complications." Elena looked at the photo again. The way Vanessa touched Vincent seemed too intimate, too familiar. "He told me he loved you," Vanessa continued, her voice low and cruel. "Said you were just a temporary obligation, that as soon as the contracts were signed, as soon as your family was financially stabilized, He'd ask for a divorce and come back to me. No. Elena shook her head, tears burning her eyes. He wouldn't do that. He loves me. He said he loves me. Vanessa laughed in a sharp, cutting sound. Darling, men like Vincent say whatever's necessary to get what they want. Do you really think that he, one of the most powerful businessmen in the city, would fall in love with a woman whose family was desperate enough to sell her into marriage? Each word was a dagger. You were convenient, Vanessa said, delivering the final blow. A temporary solution to a business problem. But me, I'm the love of his life. I always was. I always will be. Eleanor felt the tears finally overflow, running hot down her face. Get out, she whispered. Gladly. Vanessa picked up her purse and walked toward the door, but stopped at the threshold. Oh, and Elena, when Vincent gets home tonight, pay attention to how he acts, to the calls he makes when he thinks you're not listening, to the moments when he seems distant, and then you'll realize I'm telling the truth. The door closed with a soft click that sounded like a gunshot. Elena collapsed on the couch, the photos scattered around her, sobs shaking her body. Part of her knew she should be rational, that she should wait for Vincent, hear him out, give him a chance to explain. But the other part, the hurt and scared part, couldn't stop looking at those photos, at the way Vanessa touched Vincent, at the printed date that proved they'd met while he was still keeping his distance from Elena. What if it's true? The treacherous voice whispered in her mind. What if it was all just an elaborate lie? When Vincent got home that night, he found Elena sitting on the balcony, staring at nothing. The photos were scattered on the table beside her. Elena, he approached, concern evident in his voice. What happened? You've been crying? She didn't turn to look at him. Vanessa was here today. Vincent froze. Elena could feel the tension emanating from him, even without looking. What did she want? To show me the truth, Elena said, her voice coming out cold and distant. Or at least, her version of the truth. She picked up one of the photos and held it up without looking at him. These are from 3 weeks ago, Vincent. 3 weeks. You were meeting with her while pretending you needed time to adjust our relationship. Eleanor, it's not what you're thinking. Then what is it? She finally turned, and Vincent stepped back at the raw pain in her eyes. Because it looks a lot like a man who's torn between 2 women. It looks a lot like someone who's keeping his options open. I'm not torn, Vincent said, his voice firm. I chose you. I always chose you. Then why did you see her? Why did you meet with her and not tell me? Vincent ran his hand through his hair, frustration evident in every line of his body. Because she didn't give me a choice. She showed up at my office, made a scene, threatened to cause problems. I met with her only to make it clear that it was over between us, to tell her to her face that I was married and happy. And that required multiple meetings? Eleanor asked, pointing to the various photos. There were 2 meetings, Vincent said through gritted teeth. 2. The first one she ambushed me. The second was to make it absolutely clear that she needed to leave me alone. And you didn't think it was relevant to tell me about this? I didn't want to worry you about something that meant nothing. But it did mean something, Elena shouted, standing up. It meant enough for her to come here today and tell me that you still love her, that I'm temporary, that as soon as the contracts are signed, you'll ask for a divorce and go back to her. Vincent went pale. Do you believe her? The silence that followed was deafening. I don't know what to believe, Elena finally whispered, and the words seemed to tear at her own throat. 3 months ago, I didn't even know you. And now you're everything to me. Everything. And the idea that I might just be replaceable terrifies me. Vincent took a step toward her, but Elena stepped back. No, she said, her voice breaking. I need time. I need to think. Elena, please, please, Vincent, she interrupted, tears flowing freely now. If you really love me, if anything you said is true, give me space. Just let me process all of this. She saw pain cross his face, saw his hands clench into fists at his sides, as if physically preventing himself from reaching for her. Okay, he finally said, his voice hoarse. I'll sleep in the guest room, but Eleanor... He waited until she looked at him. Nothing Vanessa said is true. Nothing. You're not temporary. You're not replaceable. You're the only real thing in my life. And I'll prove it to you no matter how long it takes." He turned and walked into the penthouse, leaving Elena alone on the balcony with her tears and her doubts. And for the first time since they'd surrendered to each other, Elena felt the cold, paralyzing fear that maybe, just maybe, she'd been foolish to believe that fairy tales could be real. 3 days. 3 days of deafening silence. 3 days of sleeping in separate rooms. 3 days of stolen glances across the penthouse, of unspoken words hanging in the air like ghosts. Elena barely slept. Each night, she lay alone in the bed she'd shared with Vincent and felt the emptiness beside her like an open wound. She found herself reaching to the other side during sleep, searching for his warmth, only to wake with empty hands and a broken heart. Vincent respected her request for space, but Elena could see the suffering written on his face. He seemed not to be sleeping either. There were dark circles under his eyes, and he moved through the penthouse like a ghost, avoiding her, but at the same time seeming to gravitate toward her whenever they were in the same room. On the morning of the 3rd day, Elena woke with sudden, painful clarity. "What am I doing?" She got out of bed and walked to the window, watching the city awaken under a sky tinged with pink and gold. And then, as if a fog were finally lifting, she saw everything with perfect clarity. Vanessa hadn't shown any real proof, just photos that could be easily explained and poisonous words designed to plant doubts. And Elena had let her. She'd allowed fear and insecurity to eclipse everything she knew to be true about Vincent, the way he looked at her when he thought she wasn't watching, with a breathtaking reverence, the way he whispered her name in his sleep, as if even in dreams he searched for her, the small gestures of care, coffee prepared exactly the way she liked it, a blanket left over her when she fell asleep on the couch, her favorite flowers mysteriously appearing in a vase every week. "He loves me," Elena realized with absolute certainty, "and I let a woman who doesn't know what she lost make me doubt that. She needed to fix this. Now." Elena showered quickly, dressed, and left the room determined to find Vincent. But when she reached the living room, the penthouse was empty. Too quiet. Her heart tightened. Did he already leave for work? This early? She was about to pick up the phone to call him when she heard it, a muffled sound coming from the balcony. Elena walked over there and stopped at the threshold, her heart breaking at what she saw. Vincent was leaning on the railing, his back curved, his head down. And from his tense shoulders, from the way his hands gripped the railing hard enough to make his knuckles white, Elena realized he was crying, silently, alone, broken. "Vincent," she whispered, and her voice came out loaded with regret. He turned abruptly, and what Elena saw on his face almost destroyed her. His eyes were red, his face marked by tears he clearly hadn't bothered to hide. There was a raw vulnerability there that she'd never seen before. "Elena," he said, his voice hoarse. "I didn't know you were awake." "You're crying," she said, taking a step toward him. Vincent quickly passed his hand over his face, as if he could erase the evidence. "I'm fine." "No, you're not." Elena took another step. "And it's my fault." "It's not." "It is," she interrupted, her own tears beginning to fall. "Vincent, I'm sorry. I'm sorry for doubting you, for letting her words get to me, for pushing you away when what I should have done was listen to you." Vincent stood still, as if afraid to move, as if one wrong move could shatter this moment. "You have every right to doubt," he said quietly. "I should have told you about the meetings with Vanessa. Should have been transparent. I just didn't want anything from that past to taint what we have, what we had." The word in past tense made Elena move. She crossed the balcony and stopped in front of him, raising her hands to hold his face. "What we have," she corrected firmly. "Present tense. Now. Because I'm not going to let the past, not mine, not yours, not anyone else's lies, destroy what we've built." Vincent closed his eyes, and more tears ran down his face. "Elena, I spent 3 days torturing myself with doubts," she continued, her thumbs wiping his tears. 3 days questioning everything. But you know what I realized this morning." He opened his eyes, and there was hope so fragile there, it was heartbreaking. "What?" "That I didn't marry you for safety. I didn't marry you out of obligation or for money or because I had no choice." Elena took a deep breath, letting the next words come from the deepest and truest place in her heart. I fell in love with you without realizing it. I fell in love with the way you smile when you think no one's watching. I fell in love with how you hold my hand like it's the most precious thing in the world. I fell in love with every part of you, the easy ones and the difficult ones. Vincent let out a sound that was half laugh, half sob. I don't deserve you, he whispered. Maybe not, Elena said, a small smile curving her lips through the tears. But you're stuck with me anyway. Because I love you, Vincent Harrington. I love you with every broken piece of me, and I trust you completely. Vincent's hands flew to her face, cupping her hair, pulling her closer. Say it again, he begged, his voice broken. I love you, Elena repeated, and it had never been so easy to say those words. I love you. I love you. I love... Vincent kissed her, desperately, like a man dying of thirst finally finding water. As if she were oxygen and he'd been drowning for 3 days. The kiss was salty with tears, his, hers, impossible to tell, but it was perfect. It was forgiveness and promise. It was past and future. It was everything they both needed to say but couldn't find words to express. When they finally pulled apart, both were breathless. I never loved Vanessa, Vincent said, pressing his forehead against hers. Not the way I love you. What we had was comfortable, convenient, but it was never real. It never made me feel like I was alive for the first time. He pulled back enough to look into her eyes. You make me feel everything, Eleanor. Fear and hope and desire and peace, all at the same time. You made me want to be better, made me believe I could have more than just business success, that I could have a home, a family, love. Eleanor felt a sob rise in her throat. I met with Vanessa those 2 times only to make it clear that it was over, he continued. To tell her to her face that I was yours, completely, irrevocably yours. That she needed to move on because I already had. I know, Elena whispered. I know that now. So I always knew it deep down. I just let fear speak louder. Vincent pulled her into a tight embrace, burying his face in her hair. I almost lost you, he said, his voice muffled. For 3 days I thought I'd really lost you, and it was hell, Eleanor. It was the worst hell I've ever experienced. You didn't lose me, she promised, squeezing him tightly. And you won't. I'm not going anywhere. They stayed like that for a long moment, just holding each other, letting the closeness heal the wounds of the last few days. Finally, Vincent pulled back slightly, keeping his arms around her. I want you to know something, he said, and there was a seriousness in his eyes that made Elena pay full attention. I've already started the process to get a restraining order against Vanessa. She won't be able to come near you or me anymore. And I talked to my mother. I made it clear that if Vanessa shows up at any family event again, I won't be there. Elena felt her chest tighten. Vincent, you don't need to... I do, he interrupted firmly. You're my priority, always. Before business, before family, before anything. And I'll never again allow anyone to hurt you or plant doubts between us. He took her hand and pressed it against his chest, where his heart beat strong and steady. This heart beats for you, he said. Only for you, and it will keep beating for you until the last day of my life. Elena couldn't speak. She could only cry and nod, love overflowing so intensely it hurt. Vincent lifted her in his arms effortlessly, making her wrap her legs around his waist. Now, he said, his eyes darkening with a mixture of love and desire, I'm going to take you to our bed. Our bed, not the damn guest room bed. And I'm going to spend the rest of the day showing you exactly how much you mean to me. Vincent, Elena whispered, touching his face softly. I already know. Doesn't matter. He began walking toward the bedroom. I'm going to show you anyway. Today, tomorrow, every day for the rest of our lives. Because you deserve to know every single day how loved you are. And he showed her, with every reverent touch, every passionate kiss, every whispered word of love and adoration. Vincent proved that she was, and always would be, everything to him. When they finally lay intertwined, sated and at peace, Elena traced lazy patterns on his chest. No more secrets, she said softly. No more distance. Just the 2 of us, being honest with each other. Just the 2 of us, Vincent agreed, kissing the top of her head. forever. And for the first time in 3 days, they both slept deeply, safe in each other's arms, knowing they'd weathered the storm and come out stronger on the other side. The arrangement had transformed into love. The marriage of convenience had become the greatest truth of their lives, and together they were ready to face whatever the future brought. In the end, Elena discovered that rumors never defined who Vincent really was. The man everyone judged incapable proved to be the most capable of all. Capable of loving deeply, of choosing truth over convenience, of transforming a cold arrangement into a home full of warmth. She learned that true love doesn't come without fear, but that it's worth facing it, because sometimes the person you least expect becomes exactly what you always needed. And you? Have you ever let fear prevent something real from blossoming? Or did you have the courage to believe even when everything seemed uncertain? If this story touched your heart, leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and let us know in the comments where you're listening from. And if you felt it was really worthwhile, click the super thanks button. Your gesture makes all the difference and helps us keep bringing stories like this to you.